So before we get to consciousness and the Levin labs, I want to talk about cognition. So in 2021 or so, you had a paper called Reframing Cognition. Okay. Something akin to that?
Yeah, that sounds like, I think that might have been a review with Pamela Lyon.
Yes,
maybe
yes.
that. Yeah.
And then on page 10, section 5, something like that, you defined, or you started talking about basal cognition and uncaveated cognition. So what do those terms mean?
To be completely honest, I don't remember this part. Yes, I certainly don't remember the pages or the
basal cognition.
Yeah, I mean, so the idea for basal cognition is basically that whatever cognitive capacities we have, they have to have an origin, and we have to ask where did they come from? Because this idea that we are completely unique and they suddenly sort of snap into place. It doesn't work evolutionarily, and it doesn't work developmentally. Both of those are very slow processes. So the stories we have to tell are stories of scaling. They're to really understand these processes, we have to understand how simple information processing capacities scale up to become larger cognitive icons, more intelligent systems, project into new problem spaces, and so on. So basal cognition is the question of, okay, so where did our cognitive capacities come from? So that means looking at the functional intelligence of cells, tissues, slime molds, microbes, bacteria, and minimal matter, active materials, that kind of stuff. That's basal cognition. Well, what do the really primitive versions of cognition look like? And it's a really important skill to practice that kind of imagination, because often what trips people up is they imagine, for example, panpsychist views, right? So somebody says, "Oh, you're trying to tell me that this rock, is sitting there having hopes and dreams." Well, no, that's not the claim. The claim isn't that these full-blown, large-scale cognitive properties that you have are exactly there everywhere else. The claim is that it's a spectrum or a continuum, and that there are primitive, tiny versions of them that are also should be recognized, because we need to understand how they scale. So that's basal cognition.
So if it's a spectrum, I hear this plenty. Look, someone will say, I'm not saying everything is conscious. It's a spectrum. It's not on, off. But then to me, can't you just define on, off to be if you have a non-zero on the spectrum, then you're on? Like, for instance, you say a particle has electric charge. Is it electrically charged? Well, it's on the spectrum. Yeah, if it has a non-zero amount, you call it electrically charged. If it's zero, then you say it's neutral. So can't you just say then that, yes, the rock does have hopes and dreams, even if it's at 0.00002% of whatever you have?
Well, I personally am on board with that. I think potential energy and least action principles are the tiniest hopes and dreams that there are. So I agree with that completely. I think that is the most basal version. And in our universe, so this goes way beyond my pay grade, but for example, I've talked to Chris Fields, who is really an expert in this stuff, and I asked him, is it possible to have a universe without least action laws? Right. And he said the only way you can have that is if nothing ever happens. So if that's the case, that tells me that in our world there is no zero on the cognitive scale, and everything is on it. But again, we have to ask then. So I agree with you. I think if you're on the spectrum, then you're on, and that's it. And I think in this universe everything is on. But we have to ask ourselves, what do we want this terminology to do for us? So that's why some people critique these kind of perspectives by saying, well, then if everything is on it, then the word means nothing. Then why do we even have the word? Because if everything is cognitive, and I didn't say consciousness yet, but let's say everything is cognitive, then why do we need the word? Everything is. And I really think that we need to focus on what we expect the terminology to do for us. So let's imagine, let's just dissect this for a minute. The old paradox of the heap. Right. So you got a pile of sand, and you know that if you take off one little piece of sand, you still got a pile, but eventually you have nothing. So what? How do you define the pile? So I think for all of these, so my answer to this, and I think the solution to all of these kinds of terminological issues, is that it's not about the object itself. It's about what tools you're going to use to interact with it. So if you call me and you say, I have a pile of sand, all I want to know about the definition of pile is, am I bringing tweezers, a spoon, a shovel, a bulldozer, dynamite? How are we, like, what are the tools that I have to do what we need to get done? So that is the only value in this terminology. So, by saying that everything is cognitive, does that by itself help us with anything? No. I think what does help is if you tell me what kind of cognition and how much, and that's an empirical question, and then we can argue about it. And the answer to that question is, what are the tools that help us the most? So you show me a bunch of cells, and you say, I think this the right way to do this is physics, chemistry, and feed-forward emergence and complexity. That's how I think we're going to interact with it. And I look at it and say, I think the way to interact with this is through some interesting concepts from cognitive neuroscience, including active inference, learning, training, and so on. Then we get to find out who's right. If I can show that using my concepts, I got to new discoveries that you didn't get to, well, there you go. On the other hand, if I waste all my time, writing poems to a rock and nothing ever comes of it, well, then you're right. And so I think that the point of all this terminology, yes, we can say it's all on a spectrum, but now comes the fun and interesting work of saying, okay, so what does the spectrum look like, and where on the spectrum do the various things that we see land?
If you enjoyed this toe clipping, then the full video is linked in the description. You should also sign up for Toe Mail, which is again in the description and the pinned comment. You'll receive immediate access to all exclusive updates from the Theories of Everything podcast. It also helps me communicate directly with the core toe community. You'll also receive my top 10 toes. Think of it as the intellectual version of Quentin Tarantino's Obsession.